Philippines, a nation with over 7,000 islands, sits at the crossroads of history, culture, and conflict. Yet, when we think of global military powers, the Philippines rarely comes to mind. How did a country that stood as a strategic ally in World War II become so dependent on foreign military imports? What has stopped the Philippines from producing its own weapons, vehicles, and ships? This is the story of the Philippine defense industry, or rather, its struggles and aspirations. To understand why the Philippines cannot manufacture its own military hardware, we need to go back in time. At the dawn of the 20th century, the Philippines was a newly formed republic. Freshly liberated from centuries of Spanish rule, then briefly under the United States, the country was more focused on rebuilding its economy than developing a defense industry. The infrastructure was fragile, and the resources were directed toward national recovery, not military ambitions. The decades that followed saw the Philippines leaning heavily on its strategic partnership with the United States. The Mutual Defense Treaty of 1951 was pivotal. The U.S. promised military aid in exchange for strategic bases, which served American interests during the Cold War. But this arrangement, while beneficial in the short term, created a dependency, an over-reliance on imported weaponry rather than nurturing local manufacturing. Let's take a closer look at the numbers. Between 1950 and 2020, the Philippines received billions of dollars in military aid from the US. But with this aid came a caveat. Why build when you can receive? The Philippines never fully invested in its own defense technology, and that decision would have consequences for decades to come. The country's dependency on foreign powers extended beyond the US. France, Israel, and South Korea became other key suppliers. But while these nations had advanced defense industries, the Philippines remained on the receiving end, rarely involved in the production process. Each new weapon or ship delivered came with a reminder. The Philippines still did not have the ability to produce these on its own. There's a term for this phenomenon: military dependency. While strategic alliances are common, they often lead to a stunting of local industries. In the case of the Philippines, it became easier to purchase helicopters or tanks from abroad than to build the factories, train the engineers, or research the technologies to make them domestically. And as the years went by, the gap between capability and necessity only grew wider. So why didn't the Philippines invest in its own defense industry? The answer lies in the country's complex political and economic landscape. From the martial law era under Ferdinand Marcos to the tumultuous post-Marcos years, the focus of successive governments was on internal stability, infrastructure development, and social welfare, not on developing weapons. Defense budgets were often cut or redirected, leaving little room for long-term projects. Another key factor was the lack of skilled labor and technological expertise. Building an army tank or a naval destroyer is not like building a car. These machines require precision engineering, advanced electronics, and materials that can withstand extreme conditions. Unfortunately, the Philippines' education system, while strong in some areas, has historically struggled to produce the engineers and scientists needed to build a defense industry from the ground up. For instance, just consider the complexities of a modern warship. It's not just about steel and engines, it's about radar systems, guided missiles, sonar, and communication technologies. These components are often proprietary to countries like the US or China. To develop them from scratch would require massive investment in research and development, an area where the Philippines lags far behind. Let's now shift to economics. Even if the Philippines wanted to develop its own military equipment, it would need billions of dollars to do so. Compare this to countries like South Korea or Turkey, which spent decades and vast resources building their defense industries. The Philippines simply didn't have the same level of economic muscle, especially during the years following World War II and the Marcos regime, which left the country in financial turmoil. But it's not all doom and gloom. In recent years, the Philippine government has taken steps to modernize its military and reduce its dependence on foreign arms. Programs like the revised AFP Modernization Program aim to procure both foreign-made equipment and develop local capabilities. Still, the road ahead is long and fraught with challenges. One bright spot is the country's shipbuilding industry, which has started to show promise. Subic Bay, once a U.S. naval base, is now home to shipbuilding facilities capable of producing large vessels. However, these are mostly commercial ships, not military-grade vessels. While the potential is there, the expertise to produce complex warships is still lacking. There's also the matter of bureaucracy. For a defense industry to thrive, it needs the support of both the private and public sectors. Unfortunately, government red tape and corruption have long hindered the growth of many industries in the Philippines, and defense is no exception. Long procurement processes and lack of transparency often delay or derail potential projects. Even when the Philippines has tried to develop its own military vehicles, the results have been mixed. Take, for example, the locally made Hilot, an armored personnel carrier developed in the early 2000s. While a step in the right direction, its production was slow, and the vehicle was often criticized for not meeting the rigorous demands of modern warfare. Yet, despite the odds, the Philippines has not given up. The Department of National Defense has initiated several joint ventures with foreign defense contractors to transfer technology and expertise. One such initiative is the collaboration with South Korea to build the BRP Jose Rizal, the country's first missile-capable frigate, completed in 2020. It's not just about ships. The Philippine Air Force is also looking to modernize. Recent purchases of FA-50 jets from South Korea signal a shift toward more capable air defense. But once again, these are foreign-made. The question remains, when will the Philippines be able to build something of this scale on its own? This brings us to the issue of local talent. Universities and technical institutes in the Philippines are producing skilled engineers and scientists, but there's still a disconnect between education and defense needs. To bridge this gap, the government has started investing in specialized military training programs, hoping to foster a new generation of defense experts. Now, let's zoom out and look at the geopolitical picture. The South China Sea is a flashpoint of territorial disputes, with China becoming more aggressive in recent years. The Philippines, with its vast maritime borders, finds itself increasingly vulnerable. This has added urgency to its defense modernization efforts, but also highlighted the limitations of its defense capabilities. In this context, the idea of a self-sufficient Philippine defense industry becomes not just an aspiration, but a necessity. The country cannot rely indefinitely on foreign allies, especially when those alliances are subject to the shifting sands of global politics. However, building such an industry requires strategic foresight, consistent investment, and long-term commitment, qualities that have been elusive in Philippine defense policy. The role of foreign partnerships is also evolving. Beyond just buying equipment, the Philippines is beginning to engage in technology transfer agreements where foreign manufacturers share the know-how required to build certain systems locally. These partnerships are crucial stepping stones towards self-reliance. In fact, the Armed Forces of the Philippines has established a long-term goal to produce at least some of its military needs domestically by 2030. It's an ambitious timeline, considering the current state of the industry, but ambition is the first step toward progress. The success of countries like South Korea and Israel provides a model. Both nations were once heavily reliant on foreign arms, but have since developed formidable defense industries through a mix of state support, private innovation, and international cooperation. Could the Philippines follow this path? Of course, such success stories didn't happen overnight. South Korea, for instance, began developing its defense industry in the 1970s, focusing on building a technological base, fostering innovation, and creating partnerships with foreign companies. Decades later, it has become one of the world's top arms producers. In contrast, the Philippines has only recently begun this journey. The establishment of government agencies dedicated to defense procurement and local manufacturing is a positive step, but it must be accompanied by sustained funding and political will. Then there's the matter of scale. The Philippines, with a population of over 100 million, has the potential to build a large defense industry. However, it needs to carefully prioritize its needs. Should it focus on shipbuilding, given its extensive coastline, or perhaps armored vehicles, considering internal security threats from insurgent groups? And so, the Philippines remains at a crossroads, a country rich in history and potential, but still dependent on foreign powers for its military strength. The ambition to build its own weapons, ships, and vehicles is there. But the road to self-reliance is long and filled with challenges: economic constraints, lack of technology, and political complexities. But here's the truth: it's not impossible. With the right investments, the right partnerships, and the determination to prioritize national security, the Philippines could one day stand tall, building and defending with its own hands. But until then, the question remains: when will the Philippines finally break free from its dependency? As new threats emerge in the region and the world becomes more uncertain, the need for a self-sufficient defense industry grows stronger every day. It's not just about power or pride. It's about securing a future where the Philippines can defend itself by itself. Thank you for watching. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the challenges facing the Philippines today. Leave a comment below. What do you think it will take for the Philippines to build its own defense industry?